sitting back after a sold out show of 5,000, 10,000 people, but to have people like going at me and saying these things about me, I was kind of fascinated.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee, it's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raelyn Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
I'm still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
We got to do an intro. You're just going to keep posting to Instagram?
I'm doing it.
Welcome back, everybody, to Music is Funny. I'm Jonathan Bright.
And I'm Raelyn Nelson from the Raelyn Nelson Band, back with another ridiculous and unnecessary intro.
Today we got an A-lister, a Dane Cook.
Hi, Dane. I'm Raelyn. Nice to meet you. This is my co-host and music partner, Jonathan Bright, but we call him JB.
JB and Raelyn, thank you guys for the invite. I look forward to the chat. Can I just preface real quick? I'm having a little puppy tantrum today. Something really. I have a 1-year-old Ridgeback, and something scared her so bad last night that she's really kind of like a daddy's girl, and you're going to probably see her jumping. She's huge. It's going to look like I'm being attacked.
So don't be alarmed should a giant canine jump.
Don't be alarmed if a giant, there she is. She's just really sketchy today because, I don't know, something.
What did you do to her last night?
Dude, it's okay. Raelyn's been the same way today. Been very sketchy when I was running around your feet. Yeah, so it'll be fine.
All right, cool.
What did you do to your dog last night? What?
Okay, so I was. This shouldn't be part of it. I have a couple of cars in storage, and I have a beautiful '69 GTO, and it's like one of those cars that I wanted since I had a Hot Wheels version of it since I was a kid.
Yep.
And I turned it over last night to just run it, let the fumes fill up the garage and get the dust out of the engine. Well, I didn't know she was right there, and she'd never heard anything that loud before. And she ran faster than a cheetah. It was amazing.
Oh my god!
So I think after that, every kind of loud noise, she's like, I don't want to experience anything like that again.
Well, we'll try not to yell.
Yeah, we won't yell at you. So thank you so much for doing this. You're amazing. And just really cool to even take an hour out of your day to do this. So thank you so much.
Of course, you got it.
We like to start every podcast by asking, what is the first music you remember loving as a kid?
The very first.
The very first music I remember loving as a kid, it was Hodgepodge, which is great. A couple of things come to mind, but if I have to go with the first, if we're doing this by law, you have to give one answer. I remember listening to a lot of Glenn Miller, a lot of big band music. Loved it. I remember we had a lot of Lawrence Welk kind of music.
Yeah,
but we were also an eclectic bunch. It was everything from Fleetwood Mac. First concert I ever saw, Fleetwood Mac. And what else? A lot of just 70s classic rock. So there was this big band thing, and then there was a little bit of a jazz phase, and then even 80s hair metal. My mom and I were listening to Motley Crue and Cinderella, and we always kind of enjoyed whatever the latest incarnation was. But the first memory is some big band music.
Sounds like you had some hip parents.
I really did. My mom more than my dad. My dad was a little bit more AM.
Right.
Dad was AM, and and mom liked she spinal tapped it a little bit. She'd hit 11 on that sucker.
Right.
Yeah.
How old were you at the Fleetwood Mac concert?
Must have been about 12 or 13. They played Boston Garden. And my sister Kelly got tickets. And so we were smack dab in the middle. I'd say maybe we were about 20 rows back. And it was funny because I was also at that point in my life starting to really study stand-up comedy, which I knew in my heart was like what I wanted to do. I don't really remember, other than like, you know, when you're in junior high school, you're like, I'm going to be Evel Knievel. I'm going to be a stuntman.
Right.
But once I started getting serious about like, what do I really enjoy and what would I like to be proficient at? I love being funny. I loved healing my family when we went through turbulence with comedy. We all did that for each other. We got out of a lot of hardship by kind of elephant in the room, like bringing it out and just taking swings at it immediately. So there I was in Boston Garden looking around and loving the visceral reaction, loving the show, the music, but also really looking and saying, I wonder if I could be up there doing something as well.
So was the reaction of the fans just as incredible as watching like the band, like the whole thing? Was that the first like experience you've had to like a mass amount of people going, wow, I like this, and shooting all their energy towards the stage?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it was like the whole band was, you know, just, I was in awe. I really was like studying every band member and seeing what they were contributing. But of course, seeing Stevie Nicks, you know, spinning and having that showmanship, and I was really floored. I was it checked a lot of boxes. It hit a lot of cylinders. And as a kid that also loved having a soundtrack to pretty much everything I could, whether it was, you know, comedy skits or anything, I just always remember putting music to it.
So did you ever think about doing music? Did you ever think of singing or playing guitar?
I did. Okay. So, I did a lot of musical theater when I was in high school, and I was wearing bedazzled vests and had, you know, hats on, and I was Billy Crocker and Anything Goes, and did a lot of this. Right? There's a lot of those, opening a door and just falling into the room. Hello. So song and dance man, Danny Zuko, you name it. And I, for a very short period of time, I put a garage band together, you know, kind of like, you know, every AC/DC riff I learned, I just try to play it backwards, and those were going to be our riffs. And then, and the name of the band that lasted all of 6 weeks was, I called it Vivid Blur.
Oh.
Vivid Blur. So were you a guitar player?
Vivid Blur.
Yeah. Play guitar. Actually, I'll show you this real quick. Sorry, that's an empty frame. That's no good, but I'll show you this. This is actually my first guitar ever.
Oh, nice. An SG.
Yeah, 69.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's worth more now than when you got it.
It's got the engraved, the grave engraved right there, which I know is rare, but
yeah, they're
so that was the first guitar I learned to play on. And then my mom, actually, when my parents separated, my mom had a boyfriend. His name was Sonny Wintercorn, and Sonny gave me my first acoustic guitar, which I really, more than that, because we didn't have the money to buy an amp, so right. I had that. I'd pluck around on it. And then Sonny saw that I enjoyed that, and he was like, you should learn on the acoustic. So he gives me an acoustic guitar, and I'm playing on this thing. I'd never played on anything, so it was so hard, and I didn't learn until about 15 years later that he gave me its, oh my goodness, a Fender Balboa. And I guess it's like the 18-wheeler of acoustic. It's It was the opposite of what I should have been learning on. I think that the strings were about a full inch away from the neck.
It's like South Central bell cables you're trying to push down on the fretboard. Yeah.
I didn't have calluses. I had literal rivets. On
Why did you get the SG? Did you get that because of a guitar? Like I remember my first guitar guitar I bought was because of Ace Frehley. I didn't know. I joined a band. I'm like, I need an electric guitar. I just looked and goes, that looks like Ace Frehley's. I'll take that one. Is that the case with the SG? Or did you get lucky?
So if you think about, like, I just want to make sure it doesn't fall. So I'm going to put it.
Yeah.
Protect that headstock.
Oh, there she is.
I told you it'd be interesting with her in the mix. So I took a girl on a date. I picked her up in my mom's car, 1978 Lincoln Mark V town car, turquoise exterior, turquoise interior.
Nice.
Shame
And
you
I
still
took this
don't have
girl
that
on.
like the guitar.
What's that?
The shame you still don't have that like the guitar.
Oh man, that vehicle was like driving a city block. I think it gulped a gallon of gas every mile. It was a behemoth. So I took this girl on a date. And it was really nice, and whatever, burger and fries. And end of the night, pulled up to her house, and all I'm thinking of is my heart's beating. Like, are we going to do like a kiss? Is there going to be a kiss at the end of the date? And she says, well, I had a really nice time. I don't know if I told you I was in a little bit of a weird mood. My brother ran away from home. And I was like, oh, wow, when did that happen? She's like, oh, a few weeks ago. And long story short, she goes, he left a bunch of stuff. She goes, he left his guitar. Do you want it?
Oh, wow.
And I said, sure. She goes, okay, I'll be right back. And she comes out with the case. And here I am thinking like, this is not even going to be a guitar. It's probably going to be like, like just some old piece of crap, kind of guitar-ish.
Yeah, guitar adjacent.
Yeah. I opened up the case and honestly, the moment I looked at it, it was like when Travolta opened up the Pulp Fiction case and it was just like a gold light hit me. I knew at that moment, and I looked at it. I knew right away it was a very special instrument. And she looked and she goes, is it any good? And I went like the first acting performance. I went, yeah, I'll take it.
Wow.
And so Vivid Blur, you said it only lasted 6 weeks. Is that what you said?
Oh yeah. It was a garage band until winter, and they needed to store a vehicle, and then we had nowhere to go. So it was no road gigs there.
Were you writing songs for it?
I was, and I have them somewhere. I've kept copious notes of all the music, and I did a lot of journaling throughout my life. So I do have some of those. Yeah, I do have some of those songs.
Do you still write songs?
I don't write music. No, I don't sit down to write music, but I'll pick up a guitar and I just, I come up with stuff, and I will record every once in a while on my, phone. So I am writing, but I'm not sitting down and saying I need to, I love music. I always felt like I wanted to pursue music. I enjoy singing. I'm pretty good at it. But it's always kind of taken a backseat to the stand-up and then what's come along with being a comedian. So it doesn't quite ever go neck and neck. But maybe, you never know, right?
Yeah, well, when you're ready to record the debut of Vivid Blur, you come to Nashville. We got a studio. We'll hook you up, bring your guitar, and here we go.
I think I'm more Blur than Vivid with the music these days, but I might just take you up on that. You never know.
There you go.
Is it one of those things where throughout the comedy stuff where you're like, oh, maybe I could do music? Did it seem like it would just get in the way of comedy and you wouldn't be able to give it all?
Yeah, because it
just
sounds like
half-ass in one of them.
Yeah, you mentioned that you, like at 12 or 13, you're like, I really want to do comedy. This seems like a very young age to have realized that I want to do comedy.
Right.
Who was the first comedy? I'm sorry. What was the first comedian you remember loving?
The first comedian that I remember like locking into and understanding there was something very unique happening was probably staying up late and watching like Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
He would do the opening monologue, and he would do skits. Remember, he would always put himself in some kind of skit, the Amazing Kreskin kind of stuff, and the banter with Doc Severinsen, his band leader, or Ed McMahon. And I just this guy that whether a joke worked or didn't, not a lot of people maybe know now, but like Johnny Carson in his heyday, it's like he could nail a joke and he was hilarious. He could tee you up for your joke and help you to make it hilarious, but he could also bomb a joke and get out of it and be hilarious. And I really enjoyed watching how he did that, maneuvered it. I loved hearing the audience laugh. I loved my family laughing and watching them and that feeling of healing and what that did, laughter. And then he'd bring a guest on, and I got introduced to certain stand-ups over the years that, the Buddy Hackett's, and he had everybody, right? It was like all the iconic, the Flip Wilsons and the, you name it, funny people, Jerry Lewis, they'd all come through there. and I just loved watching how they bounced off each other. And I could already see, I guess, how they were manufacturing, formulating ideas. I knew it was, comedy, and they were actually, some of these things were rehearsed. And I was like, they make it look so effortless. And for all those reasons, I was drawn, very, very, very much drawn, like telling my mom at 14, I'm going to be a comedian. And then just to answer the music stuff, I threw the music in over the years. We had a sketchy improv group for about 4 years, from 1990 to 94, in and around Boston. We traveled around New England to do colleges, and we would bust out the guitar, the Balboa at the end, or whatever I could plug in. And we would do like improv games, and I'd, just start playing a riff, and we'd just kind of like freestyle, come up with funny stuff based on the show. And so I always put it in there, but being very, clear about it, I just didn't want to be a guitar act. I wanted to be a stand-up purist. And if I wanted to add those as accoutrements later, I dug that idea. And I still do. If you hand me a guitar, I'll bring it on stage and play. It's just not my, mission statement to be a, guitar first comedian.
So have you ever opened, or like early on, have you ever opened for bands or done intermission for bands, comedy for like within rock bands or anything? Because I know there's some sketchy, it's probably easier to do nowadays, but I've heard, I actually witnessed somebody open. I witnessed some poor guy open for AC/DC here in Nashville in like the late 80s or early 90s, and they crushed this guy.
Yeah. I think that's kind of part of the circle of life of a comedian. You're going to open up for a band. You're going to think the crowd's going to enjoy you, and you're going to learn what the opposite of a crowd enjoying you is. And it's the hazing that we all need, that years later you can look back and go, I guess it's part of the math. I needed to learn what it felt like to be topsy-turvy. The worst of those experiences for me absolutely was in 94, the comedy group that I was in, we were called Al and the Monkeys. That was the name. That was the name of our sketch group. And we were asked, what's that?
Very edgy.
I didn't name it. I still feel the need to say that. I joined it. In fact, I think day one of me joining the comedy group, I said, any chance we could change the name? They were like, no. Okay. So we were asked, after finding some local success with the college circuit, to do what was then an annual event called the Rock of Boston show. They would take Boston Garden. They'd throw about 14,000 people in there, and it was mostly bands. But one of the organizers was like, I'm such a big fan. Would you come do the Rock of Boston show? We'll give you like 15 minutes to, do some comedy, some sketch improv. And we're young, we're all, 20 years old. And, we're thinking we could do comedy on the moon if you put us there. Yeah, like, let's go. So we get there, and the lineup that I remember for the second half of the night, there was like, I think Gary Sharon and Extreme were early on. And then later in the night, you're going to have like the Spin Doctors, who had a big hit at the time. And then Phish was closing it out. And we thought we were going to go on like early. We thought we were going to be on that first 30-minute block. Well, they were like, we think it'd be great to put you between the Spin Doctors and right before Phish headlines.
Waiting for the drugs to kick in, I guess.
Oh, I wish they'd kicked in. I wished everybody's had kicked in and they were in the most blissful state. But it was unbelievably terrifying what happened to us. We got up on stage. We were maybe a minute into attempting to do like some version of a skit. We used to always wear like these colorful shirts. Like, I'm the purple shirt, and then Bobby was the green shirt, and Al was the red shirt. And like, we're up there with our shirts. And I think they think we're an a cappella group. They're like waiting for us to hit us with our tones. And we were about a minute in, and then instantly lighters and sandals just started flying through the air at us. Thousands of lighters and thousands of, Phish fans. Obviously they're in there. So sandals, we're getting pelted. I mean, honestly, I got a welt. I got hit by a lighter on my neck. And I described it as like the opening of Saving Private Ryan with lighters and sandals. And we just had to get out of there. So it was the bombing of our life, and it happened to be on one of the biggest venues of the year.
That's pretty punk rock, though, that you could rile up a crowd of hippies like that to be. I mean, granted, Boston hippies, but still, Phish fans and Spin Doctor fans violently reacting. That's not too bad.
I had never. We might have had like an off night, but we're so young and brash that we were like, we could do anything. We could make it. We could entertain you in a burning building. We just always found a way. Literally, we all went home, did like sheet therapy for like 2 days because we knew the whole city of Boston was talking about how badly we ate it. And that feeling stayed with me for years and years. Like, that's really what it's like when you are not properly, placed in a performance center.
So was this before you were doing like any kind of real stand-up, and it was more you were in improv groups, or had you done stand-up before this?
So we did. It was kind of a cool setup. The 4 members of the group were all stand-ups too. So we were pretty green in stand-up, but the group was like doing pretty well at the colleges. So we put together a show where it was like an hour of sketch and improv, and we would open for ourselves. So we would all do like 10 minutes to kind of warm up the crowd. Then we'd come back together to do the headlining improv. So we were practicing and learning our stand-up. And I was probably about 2 years in, I was already feeling like I was ready to kind of, go it alone and start doing my own gigs. So, we would do both. We would do the improv group, open up for ourselves. And then I was also getting some gigs and starting to get a little road work by myself.
That's genius. I don't think I've ever heard of stand-up opening for improv. That's a genius idea.
Yeah. It just gave us more opportunity to, and what was great is if you had a bad set early, then you could redeem yourself by hopefully being funny in a sketch. And if you had a bad set early, you also knew you could, be self-deprecating and kind of take the piss out of yourself by being like, "Hi guys, you remember me? I ate it about 40 minutes ago." You had a do-over.
Yeah.
Right. Which you need some preparation, because I guess did you start your stand-up career in Boston?
I did.
Wow. Around that time, there were some killers in that scene. What was it like as a youngster coming up through that? Because it seems like Boston comics were all giant people, like big personalities, but they were all like big men. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, it was a wild time. It was coming off what was known as the comedy boom. Comedy had never been bigger. Comedy really became, stand-up became like a $1 million industry, so to speak, in the 80s. Before that, it was like it had a certain amount of respect, but in that sense of like, there was the Rat Pack, there was funny guys, and some of them would have their own little offshoots, but it really never had a breakthrough heyday like it did in the mid 80s. Robin Williams breaking through for Mork and Mindy and Happy Days, and then suddenly it was like he's a huge television star, and it was drawing people into the comedy clubs, and then that just made everybody open a club. There was a club in every city, and if there wasn't a club, then there was like a pop-up, a Chinese food restaurant with an attic with a mic in the middle and a light. And so there was about 30 to 40 venues in 1990 when I started. And the good news, bad news of it was the boom of the 80s was over. And it really kind of just started to peter out. And yet all those heavyweights back there, our mentors were like, they were, ribbing us saying, "You came to the party late because everybody already got their deals and it's over." But now there's 30 or 40 venues that are desperately looking for comics to fill up these rooms that they started. So it was great. We got to kind of do it not under the microscope, have plenty of venues to practice and fall flat or, raise your game. And we had great mentors that we could learn and watch from that were the best, still to this day, the best of the best.
Then who were some of the guys you were coming up, like who was your class, as they call them, like some of the young guys that were coming up with you around that time?
So the class before ours was like Joe Rogan was part of that class. There was a lot of guys that went on to write, like a lot of successful writers in that era.
Yeah.
Then our class right behind them was, and like, oh, John Panette was ahead with the Joe Rogans. And then for us, it was myself, Bill Burr, Gary Gulman, Patrice O'Neill, Robert Kelly. There was a comedian named Bob Marley, a white kid out of Maine named Bob Marley.
Apparently, he doesn't get out of Maine too much. Kathleen Madigan was telling us, like, he doesn't do anything outside of Maine. He just stays there. He knows what he's doing.
He's the king of Maine. I mean, he not just Maine, but really that region.
That corner.
But when he was in Boston, and he was actually one of the first ones in Boston to go to LA, all of us we were all pushing each other because we were seeing people drop off left and right. And yet I felt like that group that I mentioned, we were the ones that we didn't know any other route in life to take. And I think we already knew, like, man, if I can't do something with this, I'm going to be very unfulfilled. And that caused us to get together and help each other out. You open for me and I'll bring you on this. I can throw you a few bucks. You want to drive down to Baltimore? Do you want to, I can come with you to Burlington, Vermont. I can do that. I can drive. I have a car this weekend. So we helped each other out.
Did it focus you in on comedy, knowing, like you mentioned, that it was sort of the end of the boom? Because I'm sure coming up during the fat of it, the idea is to go do comedy, and then you're going to get on a TV show and you're going to get rich doing that. And if that's kind of going away, you guys, and especially the guys you just mentioned, seem like pure comics like that. Maybe if it happened, sure, but wasn't really part of the plan. Just be wanting to go in and be a great stand-up comedian, especially on the East Coast. Right.
I wasn't looking. Well, I was also, I already had. My family was pretty liberal with the language, and we were listening to comedy that from Pryor and Carlin. So I knew I wasn't a network television comic in a sense, even very early in my career. And that's why it was exciting when HBO launched, and I would watch things like Rodney Dangerfield's Young Comedian Special, who I later used to host for Rodney. I'll tell you some Rodney stories later, but so I would watch Rodney, and then I saw this HBO thing, and I said, okay, I don't have to play clean. I wasn't a comic that was purposely trying to be vulgar. I just didn't want to take away the integrity of really who I was, which is like I was using some 10-cent words, and when I told a story, I didn't want to curate it for a specific audience. I just wanted to be organic, be myself, and so I wasn't looking at it as a springboard to a sitcom like a Robin Williams. I was looking at it more like, oh, wow, I guess at some point maybe Vegas calls and you live there and they will pay your way. And I kind of saw that the end game for me early was finding that cable TV or Vegas type place where, you could be irreverent.
Yeah. So how much did you, and you're one of those classic, 10-year overnight successes, but you seem to be the first one to figure out, you didn't even call it social media back in the day. It was like MySpace and whatever.
Yeah, just the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
It was still the World Wide Web.
Right, exactly. And you had dial-up. You had those noises when you tried to get on the line, like a fax machine.
That's right.
At what point did you figure out, did you just back your way into that, or did something click and go, I can really actually get to the people? Because again, you were the first one, and we'll get into it. You probably got a lot of shit from some people for going that route, but it seems like you figured it out before anybody.
I did, and I would be lying if I didn't say I knew I was onto something, and I knew I was ahead of the game, because a lot of comics, especially the classes before me, were really into that mentality still. There was this belief you're the comic, you do your show, then you disappear, you skulk, you're in some dark corner. Nobody was doing a meet and greet. That was unheard of. I would always meet my fans after the show. That was a big no-no. Why are you letting them get to that? They're going to tell you how to do your act. And I'd be pushing back saying, no, I do meet and greets. I actually learn more about what my fans enjoyed about the show. It doesn't mean I am going to curate it, just means I'm going to actually understand. It's intel to me. It was data. And it was also that I was connecting the dots before the social media stuff became even more of the hub, which was when I meet fans and I do meet and greets and I sell my CD out of my trunk and I shake hands, I'm going to be elected to some, portion of this political comedy landscape. Maybe I can, ingratiate myself so that people know that, like, I love this. I love that you came out. I like talking shop with people anyway. So if you're coming up and you want to talk about the show, I didn't see any harm or follow in that. I just felt like it was just all me learning about, what are some things that I'm nailing, and maybe what are some things that they're going to tell me feel off kilter, and it might make me go, you know what? Holy shit! I don't feel authentic in that moment. So all data, and then suddenly you plug into the 56K modem or whatever the early, World Wide Web sites are, and pretty quickly I took that college class, and I would say to them at the end of the show, "Are you guys on AOL Instant Messenger?" And a bunch of them would clap, and I'd say, "Well, after the show, you can write me on that." And I would, give out that name or give up my website. I'm telling you, within a month of that first iteration of my social media presence, I leaned back in this chair, which was the first thing I ever bought myself with any money that I made. 1998, I sat in this chair. I was in a shit little apartment over near Barney's Beanery. And yet I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time on my IBM ThinkPad computer. I said, I need a great chair. So I spent a little college money I made on this. Nice. And I remember sitting back in this chair a month in and was like, I'm about to skyrocket. I know this is going to, as long as the internet sticks around, I was like, this is it. I'm building an army.
And you did.
And you did.
But you're also smart enough to figure out how to not cash in, but figure out how to, like, anybody can get a bunch of email addresses, but you figured out a way to somehow before, and I guess you probably from the old heads got a lot of shit for this newfangled stuff for, like you said, reaching out to fans and talking and letting them in, everything. And that's just the way business is done now by everybody, or maybe not everybody, but that's how you have to do it. And you were doing it before platforms were even available to do it. Like, it was message boards basically, right?
Yeah, I was on forums. I would just pop into, whatever people were talking about in a forum. I would go in and I would, kind of like, sometimes I'd get kicked out because they'd be like, we're not talking about that in here. And I'd say, okay, I'll go, but this is my link if you want to check out my comedy. And I was uploading it to LimeWire and Napster and Kazaa. Those were like early versions of what was at that point considered like the destruction of the industry. That people's content was on there and everyone was ripping these things. I looked at that as, well, I don't have an album, but if I put my clips up there on MP3, then let people discover me that way. And I looked at it as a way to kind of like hack my way into the mainstream and go like, oh, if they're pulling everything off these sites, then maybe they'll find me as well. I got to tell you, honestly, it was like that first year of toiling on the internet, coming up with a website, social media, and getting some slack from, there were some comics that were, beating me up or, saying I was pandering or whatever it might be. But I just remember I never kept it to myself. I wasn't like trying to, I would go to comics and say, this is what you should be doing. I know you probably don't want to hear it from me because who am I yet? This is what you should be doing. This is the way it's going to be because we have 23 hours in this day that we don't work and that we're all waiting for a show. And it's been that way for a lot of years. Don't you think that's a waste? Don't you think that it's a waste of time? And I would even say that to comedy club managers. I'd say you have this club that you own and 22 hours of the day, this structure is empty. Don't you think you should be renting it during the afternoon to somebody to come in and get a green screen and do and nobody understood that wasted time of a comedian or of a club could be so utilized for growth and for expansion and for understanding the intel of where regionally are your fans? Where are they? Where should you be coming back? Where are your units sold, which it used to be before digital? Where are they selling? You could get all that stuff by using the internet and hanging out there as a hub. And I'm proud of the fact that was my turning the corner and what made the industry look twice at me.
Yeah, so I was just about to ask how long it took for the industry took notice, and I guess it was like, going on a popular podcast. Did you notice kind of almost overnight once you got it going that your ticket sales and your popular spots were going up, like doubling or whatever, just because of the work you were doing?
It was pretty immediate. And, I started getting offers from clubs, and I chose the route of less club work and more college. I just looked at it as like, I'm going to grow with this generation of comedy fans. That first 10 years, 90 to 2000 was really like, I did very little club work, even though I got a lot of great offers. I did there was some improv clubs that I loved playing, and certainly anything around Boston that I could, or New York City, the Comedy Cellar or Caroline's, but I was really focused in on the college circuit and growing up with that generation or those generation. While I was still a young man myself, let me really create that connection with those fans, and hopefully that's like, okay, if nothing else, at least I'll always have these fans to pay my rent with and grow up with. If it expands and it's the next their kids, then you hope for that. You just don't know. The zeitgeist is that's a whole different journey. But at that point, it was all about just grow with that one generation of comedy fans.
You seem to be pretty insightful about that kind of stuff too, because just to say, I'm going to tell jokes to my age people and be the comedian for them. It's kind of like old country music fan. You make that fan base, and if you don't disappoint them, you've got them forever. Right. And plus, they're the generation that was on those message boards and could be reached through that way. So it makes a lot of sense to go that way.
It was interesting because I was very bombastic in those early years, and even though I considered myself a comedy writer, it was really more based on the antics and behavior. And if you were really listening, then you probably notice like, oh, he's got pretty good vernacular and he is weaving something. But I certainly was like a whirling dervish at that point. What was interesting is the college kids were loving it. And when their parents would peek their head in, they were interested, probably more like, who's this crazy kid? It wasn't their speed, but they were interested. And I think that they also recognized that there was no, malicious intent. I had love of the game. And I think if you have love of the game, any generation can look at that and go, it may not be my toe tapper, but you can still enjoy it. And I kind of saw that I was ingratiating myself and figuring out a way to keep my fans happy. And if Looky Loos came in, then for the most part, they were enjoying the people enjoying me. It was that kind of thing.
Right. And I guess the message boards are like a precursor to the podcast where, like you said, you can find out where the tickets are sold, but also those people feel like they know you before they ever came to the show. Or if they came to the show.
That's what makes it cool.
Yeah, they felt like they knew you, like you were letting them in, which is, I guess, why some comedians were pissed off and you're not supposed to let them in or whatever. But you were also a trailblazer in that, and I'm sure they... if one is shitting on one's idea about going and doing this, and then that idea pays off big time, it's only going to make them a little angrier even at your success, I would think. There had to be some jealousy and stuff like that about who this fucking kid think he's doing, and then all of a sudden, like, wow, why is he selling so many fucking tickets?
It was like, and to some extent, there's always, even though we could always dispel this, but there's a belief that there's like a certain pecking order and there's certain chronological, but that doesn't exist. Somebody makes it when they make it. They could be in it for a month. They could be, the long-term effect is you make it too soon. Do you have the fuel and the ideas to evolve and take it, beyond? If you break too late, how do you find your fans? How are you communicating with them? I think I was pretty fortunate that like, I was savvy enough to at least go, if this is temporary, I know I've got these fans here. If I can marathon this, which I want to do, I want to be doing this for the rest of my life. Then when the lean years come, and there's going to be lean years, I knew that because my favorites would tell their stories of like, I'm back on the road, nobody wants me. And I would understand, a career is like, you get knocked in the teeth, and there's good data and some great panel stories there, but it's gonna be tough. Store up for the winter, and hopefully, you'll make it through. And I realized that it was like, during those years that, you're not in vogue, then your fans are your fans and they're going to be there to support you. So now the cool thing is 30 years later doing a show and it's like, hey, I saw you in 94 and this is my kid. And now it's like, I'm meeting my original fans, their families. It's an embarrassment of riches. I will tell you that. I love it. Great career.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But I just remember going to a friend's house, and I was probably like late teens, and her telling me that she had reached out to you on AOLIM, and you had responded to her, and I'm like, well, that's really cool. I think that.
It was even cooler because also it was like there I was with this. I was always fascinated with like where are you? I'm in Tampa. I'm in Tempe. I was always loving that. I was like, wow, how cool. Here it is. I'm in my little apartment. And it's a portal, this thing is a window to the world. And yet I was also a young guy and I had never had girls interested in me at all. So when a girl wrote me, it was like, hey, what's up? I'm a girl from da-da-da. I was always like, well, maybe I'm meeting my wife on here. Who knows?
Absolutely. So did you, and I don't know, I guess when I first heard your stuff, it was before, like, again, all the social media stuff. And I recognized it was funny, and you seemed to be on this rocket ship of fame. It was much later till I learned that there was a lot of blowback because, there wasn't as much chitter chatter on the internet back then, that I found out there was a period there where people, like your fellow comics, some of them weren't so down with your success and things like that. And I couldn't understand why. Like, I'd seen Tourgasm and all that, hilarious stuff. And I was thinking on the way over here, I wonder if you would have actually had a podcast capabilities back then and were doing a podcast, whether it would have squashed a lot of that shit, because people know you and the rumors can't get out and change people's minds. Like, you read about stuff and like Dane's an asshole, blah, blah, blah. But we get the opportunity now in this day and age to actually go on and watch people. And I would think that would have just squashed all of that because aside from typing, people would have been able to talk to you or hear you talk as a normal person.
No way anybody could call you an asshole when you're talking to your fans. You responding to them.
But I liked it back then. I liked being mysterious, polarizing. It was a bunch of things. It was great for business. It kept me from being milquetoast. And I've always been I'm a homebody. Never had a drink or drug in my life. I'm non-confrontational, or at least to the point where it's like, I don't like to. So at that point, I was still dealing with, also growing up, I was a real introvert as a kid. I dealt with social anxiety. On stage, I was at the helm. I still had a lot of problems confident-wise off stage. So sitting back after a sold-out show of 5,000, 10,000 people, but to have people like going at me and saying these things about me, I was kind of fascinated. There was a period of time where I didn't go on morning radio shows, which was like a version of podcasting, and defend myself, because I thought I was way more interesting in theory than I was if I got on there and said, I don't have beef with that guy. I don't even know him. And then they'd go, what do you think he's saying that stuff for? And then what am I going to do? Go, well, he's obviously jealous.
Right.
It's like, you never want to hear that from the person who is having the moment. So you're like, I'm not going to go out and say the truth, which is, there's a lot of jealousy and there's a lot of frustration because I just blew past the whole, I'm in the diamond lane and everybody else is like, how? Every single comic that was going on a radio show at that time, they would tell me years later, the comics that like had that early frustration, they'd say, how hard it was to be on the road, trying to like figure out where the next C-list gig was going to be. And the first question they would ask me is, why don't you do what Dane Cook does? Like, they hated me. I was public enemy number one, but it was way more interesting than truly what I thought or how I felt about myself, which was like, oh yeah, no, I definitely think that this perpetuation is more fascinating. Now, where it hurt, really did actually start to hurt my brand, was like, as that stuff became kind of etched, and then some other comics that maybe said some stuff about me started finding their own success. Now the fans are like, oh, that guy hates Dane. So now we should. So then it wasn't just comics saying it. It was like, now they're fans, and your fans get pitted. And where it started to hurt me and hurt the brand was like, I don't want my fans to feel bad for being a fan of mine. You know what I mean? I don't want my family reading things about me that they'd call me and be like, why are people saying these things? You're not this kind of person. Like, it was hurting me that it was hurting my family. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was the hardest part. You know, my mom would she was like, you were the most sensitive kid, and that anybody would come at you like this. And I'd say, I know, Mom, but it's interesting. You know, Darth Vader's interesting. We like the hero villains. And I said, I'll ride it out. I'll make it through. And I'll just continue to kind of stay on message, and people who know my heart and get to know me, meet me. Once I'm not the belle of the ball anymore, I said, this is going to end. I'll be the old bull on the hill someday. And the good news is I can always look back and say, at the highest peak of my success, when people were nipping at my heels, I was not listening to anything except the sound of applause and the sound of people excited to see my show. So I didn't really let it hit me then. And then some years later, as I was getting getting some gray, I was like, I could look back and I could go like, I get it. I understand why a lot of people were, up in arms about it. But truly, there were no real things that I could look back on and say, I have to take ownership of this thing that I did or that thing. It was really more of just accepting that that's part of a career. Is they talk you up, they write you up, and then they got to write you down. And so it's like almost like, what's that great quote? What other people think of me is none of my business.
Right.
Yeah.
There's only one thing that we can continue to do, and that's evolve personally with your faith, with your belief, with your hopefully ability. And you can't force the masses or the Twitter trend, or none of that is, you can't make any of that work in your favor. All you can be is true to yourself, true to your evolution, and then hope that you get a lot of swings at the bat.
Now,
well, let me get in real quick on this subject. One of the cool things about that, though, is one of the realest comedians that's ever been, and one of my favorite, Patrice. I've heard him on Opie and Anthony defending you vociferously. I think Mark Maron was on there. You'd just been on it just a long time ago, but you'd just done a Mark Maron podcast, and he wasn't really shitting on you, but and then he would make a snarky comment, and Patrice was not letting him off the hook at all. He's like, come on, Mark, why are you saying that shit? And he had your back, man. And that's gotta feel cool when that guy, it's like,
Well, and we knew that Mark was a guy that Mark had so many, before Mark Maron's podcast became, this brilliant breakthrough thing. That guy had so much almosts, and he was a tough guy to know even when we were coming up. Like, he was really the guy. I think I said to Mark when I did that podcast, because we kind of went toe to toe, and I said, Mark, you remember the movie The Mummy, the sand creature, and the face comes through and it's scary and it follows you through the desert? He's like, yeah. And I go, that's how we felt about you. That's what it was to see you before you made it. You were not an approachable guy. You were not a likable guy. And we knew you didn't like any of us. And he owned that. So it was like, there was Patrice, my friend, my graduating class. And when he kind of came to my defense in that, it was like, yeah, we all know that Mark was not a guy at that time who was really accepting that his career had stalled again, and that somebody just flew past. It pissed him off. And I just became the target, as I should. Anybody who makes it that far ahead's got to get roasted. It just goes with the territory, you have to. You take those hits. And so where I was sitting, again, was like, there was a lot of noise, but it wasn't hurting me in the sense of like, my fans are happy. I'm growing as a human being. I'm figuring out this industry. I don't have a playbook. I'm still a welfare kid from Boston who fucking made it to my pipe dream. And so I was trying to work it all out. And the fact that I had people yapping for or against, it was just at that time kind of weirdly exciting to be embroiled.
Okay, so you said no drugs, no alcohol, nothing. What is your vice then? You have to have one.
I just love 24/7 creating. If I have, I guess, the thing that I can't, the void that I can't fill with enough of it, I'm always thinking of stand-up. I love it today as I loved it year one. It still feels like year one a lot because I'm always pushing myself to try something new. But then I have an insatiable appetite to learn the production side. And as my company gets behind the camera more, I want to put that same valuable energy and love that I have of curiosity into storytelling.
So now, after we've got the music and comedy, like when you started doing movies, was it just the offer and you're like, well, I'll try maybe I'll try that? Was it, there's some cool actors that I want to do it with? Or was there a little bit of like, well, I'm kind of being rejected by the mainstream comics here. Maybe there's a whole nother crew I can hang out. Like what was the thought process behind doing, because you did some big movies.
Yeah. I mean, Hollywood sees that you put asses in seats. That gives you like the golden ticket. They don't even really care what your act is. It's like, once you get into this town, it was just more of like the analytics. And so you get a lot of stuff thrown at you, and some things are terrible ideas with a lot of money on it. And you can either take those and maybe sync with them, or you can find your fans. And so I was lucky that I had some fans at Lionsgate. I think we did about 7 or 8 films together. Had a good group. They knew me, I knew them. And got to hitch my cart in bring my fans into some films that were, closer to my stand-up, R-rated comedies. I think I did a couple that was a little more family fare, like A Dan in Real Life or Employee of the Month. But I was looking at the guys like Sandler. Sandler was a perfect example. Took his SNL career. We were always on the road together, crossing, in the night. We were always like somewhere a week before or after each other or seeing each other. And it was like, oh, okay, I want to see if I can evolve and bring my fans into film and television, like Adam and Robin and some of these other people that I admired. I guess the only difference was I stopped taking on a lot of the comedies because I also enjoyed the comedians that I saw that I loved, the Jerry Lewis or Robin, that they were doing things, they were storytellers and they were telling stories that weren't just funny. And I didn't want to just do funny. I loved comedy, but I knew that was just a part of the kinds of stories that I wanted to share. And so it was like taking my foot off the gas of just those kinds of films and trying to exploit the hard work I put into anything I do. And then I got a chance to work with like Costner and do some pretty dark, edgy stuff.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end.
We need some Rodney stories before we finish this up. How did you meet Rodney Dangerfield?
Oh man, Rodney was, I was at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, and for a number of years, Rodney would come in, and oh my goodness, it was like the laughs he would get, and just the for a guy that said I can't get no respect, the respect he would get. It was magical. I got to, share stage time and space with a lot of the comics that were, Robin would come in. I would do shows with Robin at the Laugh Factory, or somebody like, Rodney or who would come in from time to time, just like Roseanne, Dice. They would come in like at their peak. But I remember doing shows where Rodney would come in. Rodney had a certain thing that when I was hosting at the Laugh Factory, this must have been around like 2001 or 2, I would host shows and Rodney would come in, and he had this rigmarole you had to do with Rodney every time. And this is what it was. He'd sit in the booth, and I remember the first time he told me, and I never could not hear his voice in that, distinct Rodney tone, explaining, this is what you need to do. You're going to go up on the stage and you're going to say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a absolute, comedy, whatever I would say, legend in the room tonight, Mr. Rodney Dangerfield. And the crowd would look, and he'd be in the booth, and he would kind of wave, and you'd have to say, give it up for Rodney Dangerfield. And the place would go nuts. Everybody like trying to get up, see over each other, and there's Rodney over there in the corner, just, looking like Rodney, right? And then you'd have to say, Rodney, Rodney, would you come up on stage for us, Rodney? Would you come up? Would you want to see Rodney? And they go nuts. And then he'd stand and he'd do like a standing version of like, come on, Rodney, will you come up? No. And he'd sit back down. He'd say, you guys want to see Rodney? Come on, Rodney, please. And then he'd get up and the place would go apeshit. And what was so remarkable about it was, comics are such interesting. We're fascinating. We're a fascinating group because there's a little part of us, for whatever makes us want to do this occupation, that's a little fractured and broken, and we're pretty precious. I think we can come off like, put us up there in the spotlight. But if you get to know comics and if you've shared a lot of time with a lot of, there's a lot there that needs to lead up to feeling like we deserve to have a mic in our hand and be that center of attention. And it's different for every comic, but it always seems to be like a few things that are in the mechanics. And Rodney needed to know that they needed to see him. He couldn't just go up and he could have just walked in the door and gotten the same reaction if he just walked on stage. But he really needed to hear that young group of people love him.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot. It showed me a lot. It really was one of many lessons I learned from the illustrious Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, I wonder if he was
Maybe
always
you
slightly
guys
paranoid
could do
about.
that
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, we'll do that
Y'all
for
do
you.
that for me?
Come on, Raelyn, sing a song. No. But I wonder if Rodney was kind of like that because he made it at such a late age. He's probably always curious if the younger crowd liked him because he got funnier the older he got to me, and he was no spring chicken when he made it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is something, and again, I've shared 30 years of watching the process of somebody going from who they are in the green room to, who they become when they take the stage. And it's just it's a beautiful thing to watch, but it's also, there's a lot of complexities, with a lot of performers, but in particular with comics and what we need or what they need to fill that void, in certain things that have to kind of like preface it before you take the stage. And again, I could tell 1,000 stories of 1,000 comedians and who they were 10 steps before they became like, a master entertainer in that moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because comics, to get any kind of energy, you have to rely on like as a band or a team, like your guitar player, you can pick each other up while you're playing, doing something, so you can get a little bit of what you need from the group that you got. But comics, it literally is what you can bring to your own self and what the crowd gives you, and that's it.
Yeah, for me, it was always chasing this idea of, I loved Carlin, and I loved the introspective element. As I loved that he could dial it into, different. He could investigate his feelings, and that's something it took me a long time to be able to. I was like, I still want to get LPMs, laughs per minute, in the comedy jargon, but I want to grow. I don't want to be derivative. I don't want to be what I was before. I want to learn a new element. I want to take my fans in it. I want to have a new story to tell. And so those early formative years, when I look very far back now, it's like, it was this desire, especially when I broke through. And when you break through, you're in that moment. Like, that's what you are, right? When you break through, you're finally like, that's what you are. You're that. And I knew that. And so all the things that broke me through right around 2000, 2001, I was immediately like, my mission statement on my early website was, if you are here to become a fan of mine, welcome. But I'm going to take a lot of risks in my career. So if you don't like that, don't follow me. Because I was so frightened. I was really scared of being kind of cast aside because I wasn't
Canceled?
it wasn't even canceled at that time. Nobody was canceled at that time. I think you were put on layaway at that time. But it was this idea of like, man, the thing that turns you stagnant in this industry across the board is being exactly what they want you to be. And I never wanted to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to turn into a punchline where everybody knows you for the one catchphrase, and then you're that catchphrase for the rest of your career.
Yeah, it's like, you know how like you watch old sitcoms or anybody who had the wacky name, it was real tough. If you were Potsy,
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean? If you were Screech, it was like, yeah, it's like, so you wanted, very much so to, I think that what's so great about this era is you're seeing so many gifted performers that are being more introspective earlier, and that's allowing people to understand those complexities. I can be funny, but I'm more than that. And I think it's changed comedy forever. I don't think it'll ever go back into what it was before with a veil in between your stage presence and I think that's for many reasons, that's awesome. I think that's great how you grow personally. So you're not trying to keep people distracted off who you really are. I think you can kind of do your growing pains with your crowd. And I'm happy to know that I was one of the first people that gave people my power in that way, and it was embraced.
Yeah. So when's the first time you remember hearing about my grandpa, Willie Nelson? What's your own?
Are you familiar with him?
Do you know who Willie Nelson
country
is?
music singer?
No. I've never spent any time searching the internet that I was so lovingly partitioning.
I thought you were Ricky Nelson's granddaughter.
No, I mean, like I said, growing up in a family of, I remember we had in my dad's workshop, 8 tracks, right? We had all these stacked 8 tracks, an 8-track tape player. Isn't it funny? We're talking about something, somebody's going to be like, what the hell is an 8-track? And that's the first, time I remember ever listening to Willie Nelson. And I remember I think I was the person in my family that started branching off and listening to stuff that was not just in the early category. I was finding music and musicality that was so different. And I loved, country Western music because it was storytelling. And I wanted to be a storyteller and not just a one-line comic. So I was drawn to, again, Fleetwood Mac or Willie Nelson, stories. These are stories. There's something is in the ether that's beyond just a great ditty. There's some real meaning in this. So yeah, I was partially, that's why I was also excited to be a part of this today because of the storied institution that is your pop.
Yeah, he's the coolest ever.
Yeah.
He is the coolest. I wish I could say that personally. I've never met him, but I feel like I have.
Raelyn's never met him either, so. He's just found out about her the other day.
I get to text with him a lot. I haven't seen him since before the pandemic, though. So.
Oh, wow.
And also, before we get out, I want to touch on what was the tourgasm thing like? Because we talked to Gary Goldman. He seemed way more high-strung back then than he is now. But was the drama created when you guys were doing that? Or was it, pretty candid? Because it was like being in a band, really. You guys were on a tour bus with the 3 or 4 comics, all in the same thing. You're having to deal with each other's personalities, which...
Yeah. I think Gary was in year 4 of a 10-year meltdown.
Okay.
Which I'm sure he probably detailed for you guys.
Yeah, we went through a little bit of that.
Yeah. Gary was in an evolution that was, exclusive to Gary. Again, every comic, I'm sure we could get into the minutia, and you see a lot of those, dark corners and trials and tribulations. But Gary was in a rough, tough way. Where it isn't in the edit. And maybe it is I was having the time of my life because I was discovering and being discovered, right? Mm-hmm. I had this guy right next to me that I loved, that I wanted to see, enjoy being in that spotlight, hopefully pull some of my fans to him. That was the whole purpose, right? I just wanted to share the wealth. And the fact that Gary had to dip out because he just couldn't take it, I didn't even know at the time. It was years later that I really understood what that was. So the drama was more just a little bit for the sake of show, just because it was Gary left and it is part of the whatever we're filming. But also, and he probably explained this, we didn't know that wasn't a TV show. We weren't creating a TV show. HBO, none of those people, that was just for us. So even the stuff we were saying was not really anything we'd ever thought people would be watching as entertainment television. It wasn't until HBO called me and said, what else do you have in the vault that we could buy and put on? And I said, I have 400 hours of me breaking through and actually capturing this moment of I thought it was going to be a home video for my kids to see. Like, this is when your dad was cool and broke through. And instead it turned into a series. And fortunately or unfortunately, that became a storyline.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that you were doing, I thought it was specifically for HBO. You were just doing that and they discovered it and said, what else you got?
I was cutting them as free webisodes. I had hired a crew just to follow us. And I thought, I'll take these and cut them as like little free clips from my website. But I told him to film the whole month. I was like, we'll film everything. Not thinking at that time, like, that's too much that's 400 hours of foot. Like, I'm never going to sift through that. It was actually ridiculous. And probably one of those moments of my producing career where I'd change hats and go, kid, you're wasting all my money. do 10 hours. So, but we filmed the whole month. I had it all in a backpack, some of the discs. I was on my way from HBO for a meeting with the president of HBO, my friend Chris Albrecht, who was there at the time. We were developing Vicious Circle, which was my homage to Carlin, because I wanted to do a big show at Boston Garden in the round, much like the early Carlin gig that I saw in 1978 on location. He did a gig in the round in Arizona. So there I am talking with Albrecht, and we're talking about, like, what do you want to do? And I want to do this thing in the round. And he's like, I think a lot of people are still trying to discover you. Is there anything else we could show? Like, what are you working on? And I said, I have a backpack filled with DVDs and I'm going right now to edit some webisodes. I could upload some stuff to my website. And he goes, well, throw one in. And I popped in a random disc, and it was us on the bus and, just talking smack and being stupid. And he watched it for like 10 minutes, watching. And then I remember he looked and he goes, I'm going to buy this. I want to buy all this footage. And I was like, I'm sitting behind him alone in the office, and I was like this. I'm like, this sold a TV show that I had no clue I couldn't sell a TV show on the 20 pitches that I had when I went in with the best idea. It was like, I was in no business for a lot of years. And then he goes, I'll buy this. Cut this up into like 8 episodes. We'll air it before Vicious Circle as a way to hopefully get people into your, into your scene. And so I just took all that footage, went back, and I remember I called Gary and Bobby and Jay and said, we have an HBO show, and now I'm going to try to figure out how to turn everything we said and did into something interesting. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, I was like, what an amazing story. Yeah.
Okay, last question, and we'll let you go. Do you listen to comedy podcasts when you get in your car? Are you listening to music or podcasts or books on tape?
Music, mostly music. I definitely do. I sometimes listen to some. I love, TED Talk type stuff or anything that's kind of inspirational. But I like doing podcasts. I enjoy being on them and sharing time with other interesting, creative, collaborative people.
Yeah.
You've never done one yourself, though, like the Dane Cook podcast, have you?
Well, I did. But here's what's kind of funny is
I did in 1991.
I did. So get this. Before it was called a podcast, I had a jukebox on my DaneCook.com site. And the jukebox was in the corner, and I would upload myself MP3s of me doing a rant. I would just go on and I would talk for about 30 or 40 minutes, kind of similar to something Burr would do now.
Right.
And I would just talk, yap, and then upload it. And it was called Voice of Doom. And I called Voice of Doom because eventually somewhere in my rant, I was going to be like, talking about something that was just, why is this getting attention? And I was kind of poo-pooing on certain things, razzing it, roasting it, Voice of Doom. So before it was called podcasting, it was just called the jukebox. And I did it for about 7 years. So when podcasting broke through, I was like, that's not interesting to me. I already did that.
Wow, that's a cutting edge.
Of course you already did it.
Yeah, but no. Now I look at it, I was like, I was too early to that party, because by the time I dipped out of it, it was really becoming the even more core, central aspect of a career. But I will tell you what I have been doing for the past year, and take it from, I'm no soothsayer, but as somebody who kind of sees the trend, I think something that's been more interesting to me than just straight podcasting, which I think it's a good kind of like something in tandem is, I've been doing these things like Clubhouse chat or Twitter Spaces. And when I do a Clubhouse chat, I get a few thousand people in there, and I do what I was doing in 2001, which is I say, okay, you're next up, Sarah. Where are you from? And on any given night, without even any advertising, without any event scheduling, I hit the button. The other night I had New Zealand, South Africa, London, New Jersey, a couple of Vancouvers, LA. I had a global stage. Wow. Asian territories, some comedians over in the Asian territory, like broken English, and yet we're still figuring it out. And my stuff plays there. And these comedians from across the world are asking for some advice and some insight. And I use these chats dual. They're funny. They can have comedy in them, but I'm really using it as a way to share my failures and successes, to let people know the key to any kind of success is staying present. And regardless of the tech you're using, be real in the center of it. Because where a lot of these things miss is if there's no soul on your webpage, if there's no soul in your podcast, it doesn't matter how fancy your graphic design guy is with the spinning title, you will fail.
Yeah.
So the Clubhouse chats and Twitter Spaces and creating global stages to where when my special comes out, I'm filming my next special in January. When I'm done with that and we've got it edited and I'm ready to announce what streamer and where it's going to be and 30-year victory lap of like doing what I love, I will probably before a podcast be doing a Clubhouse and a Twitter Spaces and whatever other version of those I want to use to enhance, because nothing is permeating and reaching global faster than that aspect right now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is
Thanks for the tip, buddy.
Thanks for the tip. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be great to do something like this, and then people watch an episode, and even if we jumped on a Clubhouse after this and said, hey, listen, if you listened to this yesterday, it was uploaded, we're actually going to be on with Dane for an hour, and then we would do a Clubhouse, and we would have a global audience that is not only perpetuating more people watching your podcast, but then they get to come in, share some space with us. It's that same window to the world, early MySpace.
Yeah.
And it's just that added element to what it is you guys are doing great here.
That's awesome.
Okay, so
If that's advice, great. If it's an offer, we'll do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Let me know. Once you guys get this up, we could, pick a day, pick a time, and have a little Q&A. People can come in and cherry pick the things that were either, highlight moments, or who knows, maybe we stepped in it and somebody can point that out and say, well, no, I want to push back, counterpoint on that one thing, Dane. Let me say this. And, it's fun. And it's also fun because you never really know you never really know what's going to happen when you randomly bring a person onto the stage. And there's a little bit of that danger that I like, that it's not homogenized.
Right.
You're going to hit go live with somebody and they're going to fucking tell you what's on their brain. And if you're a person that's living in the present, then you're Teflon, but it doesn't mean you're not going to, get some stuff slung at you. So I like the danger. I like being on the cusp of a live performance that's improvisational, funny, but sometimes goes there. Check it out.
Okay.
You like working without a net. Perfect.
I do.
Yep.
Dane, you're awesome. Thank you for being here.
I cannot thank you enough for throwing an invite to me. And I'm so glad that we finally wrangled it, got it together. And thank you guys so much. I hope we get to do this again.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. It's good to talk to you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Dane Cook is my favorite comedian.
Yeah, he's great.
I love that dude. He invented the internet, basically. Kind of.
He did. Don't be an asshole.
Maybe we'll go on Clubhouse after this is on. I don't know.
Enjoy your groceries.
And it'll be fun talking to people internationally.
I know your mama's name.
Don't be an asshole.
Free Britney, we did. Congratulations.
And we're out.